Hey, what's up guys? It's Luke and I am restarting this review channel. This channel had a bunch of movie reviews and TV show reviews, but I wanted to restart it because, well, number one, I'm stuck here at home like many people are. It's an unprecedented time in our world, in our country, all over because of the issue that's happening right now with pandemic. So I'm here. I got nothing to do. Let's talk about some shows. Let's talk about some movies. So I'm stuck here at home. Why not make some videos? So that's number one. I'm restarting this channel. I kind of wanted to start fresh. I don't think I've neglected the channel, but I just haven't had as much content as I wanted to. And so I just said, you know what? Let's just start fresh. So here we go. We're going to start fresh with a property that I really love. So for example, I love Star Trek. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. I watched it in the 80s with the original series, growing up watching reruns of that, and then when the Next Generation came out, I watched it every week, looked forward to it. Deep Space Nine, you know what? It started really, really slow, but it came on really big at the end, and it became my favorite Star Trek series. And then there was Voyager, Enterprise, and then of course Discovery, and now Picard. A lot of people don't like Discovery. I like Discovery. Disclaimer. There are many people who don't like Picard. I like Picard. So let's review episode 1. So episode 1 of Picard is pretty different than the Next Generation. It has a really different feel to it. And before I continue reviewing it, I want to mention that first, I'm going to kind of talk about the show in general. So if you haven't seen it, this is a great place to watch and kind of get my opinion on whether you should see it or not. And then after that, I'll do sort of a spoiler section so that we can talk more about the episode rather than if you should watch it or not. So I have 3 things that I want to mention that have nothing to do with the actual story of it, but more about the show in general. So number 1, it may not please you if you're like a super hardcore Star Trek fan, especially Next Generation era, because it is dramatically different. You're not going to get that same Next Generation vibe or feel or look. It's completely different. The Next Generation showed you a future where you had all sorts of sleek monitors and everything was like touch enabled and rounded corners and clean and just a very 90s future. So it was futuristic, and even actually by today's standards, I would say it still looks futuristic. If you look at, Deep Space Nine, because that's the Next Generation era, and Voyager and stuff like that, it looks futuristic. But Picard, the show, doesn't feel that way at all. In fact, it feels very much a product of now. So you're going to see Picard at his chateau, which you saw in the Next Generation, but they don't have all of the things that Next Generation had. The look and the feel, it's completely different. They have replicators and things like that. Those are pretty staple of Star Trek, but much of the standard stuff in Star Trek isn't there. It feels more like a drama happening maybe in the near future, especially those things that happen at Chateau Picard, but not like the distant future. It has just a really different feel, not just in look, but also, more importantly, probably in tone. It is a really different, more mature. And when I say mature, I don't mean that Next Generation wasn't for mature thinking people. It's just more mature in terms of like content. Like if you were going to rate something rated R or PG or PG-13, I think Star Trek The Next Generation and all the Star Treks before were probably rated PG, I would say. This is definitely PG-13, venturing into R territory. And that brings me to point number 2. This show is a lot more violent than the original Next Generation shows were. The original series was Deep Space Nine. Now, Deep Space Nine had a lot of war, and there was a lot of fighting in Deep Space Nine, but the the death that you see in Star Trek Picard is a lot more visceral. It's a lot more gory and bloody. The hits are harder, I think, in Picard. It has a very modern approach to violence, and so it's definitely a whole lot more violent than some of the older Star Trek shows. It also, like I said, has some mature language in it. You're going to hear quite a bit of swearing. Not quite a bit, but enough that you're like, whoa, they put a lot of swearing into this show, because you just didn't hear it in The Next Generation. And actually, they made a point in The Next Generation to say, or actually the original series, to say they don't swear in the future. Like Captain Kirk in Star Trek 4 was telling Spock, you hear this language? This is stuff you don't hear anymore. And Spock didn't know what the heck it was. Well, swearing is in Picard, and so it's kind of retconned in that way. If you don't like retcons or things being too different, you might not like Picard. And finally, this is a 10-episode story arc, and I think it's really slow paced. So, you know, you're used to having a Star Trek episode combined into like one hour's worth of time, but we've got like 45 minutes to an hour episodes combining into one huge story arc that lasts 10 episodes. So this beginning is really slow. Slower than I think a lot of people would like. There's a lot of dialogue. It takes a long time to get things moving and going. And I think a lot of people think that it drags. Now, I don't think that it dragged at all. I really just immersed myself into the Star Trek Picard universe, and I kind of just accepted the way they were. And that's just kind of how I do things, because I want to get the most enjoyment I can out of something, and I try not to nitpick too much. I mean, if there's huge nitpicks, sure, I might not like it. But for the most part, I just sort of accept this is the show they're giving me, and I'm going to watch it. I'm going to see if I like it or if I don't. And in this case, for Star Trek Picard, I actually really liked it from episode 1. I enjoyed it. I love seeing Captain Picard again. It was cool to see another character appear in episode 1 as well. So I thought it was a great episode. It introduced an interesting new character. Actually, many new characters. You're not going to see a lot of Picard's old crew in this show. So it's different. Now, maybe they're trying to market it to a new audience, but I don't see how they can, because, you know, you're really banking on the Picard name. So you want the old fans to come back. You know, they might say, you know, new fans are going to find something new, and you will. But there is enough going on in Star Trek Picard where when you're watching it, you really got to know some of the history of Star Trek, especially from The Next Generation and from some of the movies. And if you don't have that information, I think it's so much harder to understand what's going on in this show. So is it for brand new viewers? I think they want it to be, but I think it's going to be hard for them. And for folks that really love The Next Generation and Picard and things like that, it's going to be hard for them too, because it feels so different. It's trying to hit a lot of spots, and I like it. I just don't know if a whole lot of other folks will. So check the show out. I'd love to hear your opinion of Star Trek Picard, and if you like it or not. So that wraps up the initial review of Star Trek Picard Episode 1. I just wanted to give you some general feelings overall about it, but now I'm going to talk about some spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, feel free to click away and come back when you are finished, and then we can kind of talk a little bit more about the show. Okay, are you guys ready for some spoilers? Because I'm gonna go scene by scene or part by part through Star Trek Picard, and we're gonna kind of talk about each little part of it. I have my notes here, and so I'm gonna refer to that as we go on. So first of all, we start out with an amazing shot of the Enterprise D. Now it's interesting, Data's wearing his uniform, his gold uniform. But Picard, he's not. He's like wearing what he wears on Chateau Picard, and they are playing. No one else is there. It's a very dreamy sequence. It doesn't look exactly like the old 10 Forward did, but pretty close. And it's a dream anyway, so who knows? It can be kind of anything. But it was really cool to see the Enterprise D there and see Data. Now, Brent Spiner is a lot older. He didn't want to play Picard. He didn't want to play Data anymore because Data shouldn't really age. But, of course, Brent Spiner does. Data's an android. But I thought he looked okay. He didn't look like he did in the movies. In the movies, he looked different than he looked in the TV show, which is totally fine. I totally get it. It's not a big deal. But he looked a little bit heftier in this than he did. But he still had the Data mannerisms and the way he talked. So that was all there. I really liked it. And I love the part where Picard figures out Data's tell when he plays chess. Because Data's trying to fake him out, but Picard sees that he's trying to fake him out. So he knows it's fake. Great little nod to how smart Picard still is. He hasn't lost it. You know, a lot of people who watched The Next Generation knows Picard has like this syndrome where I think he like starts getting crazy in the head or whatever. And we know that, no, Picard is still a sharp guy. All right. We also see that Picard's really old. He looks really, really old. I know Patrick Stewart was older already as Captain Picard, but I just feel like he's aged a lot in this show. He doesn't have that booming voice. It's very it's like he has a cold or something all the time. And so he does seem weaker in that way. A lot of bad things have happened to Picard. He seems to be just waiting for death when he's at the chateau. You know, they were trying to save Romulus. Things went really, really wrong. But a couple of Romulans, former Tal Shiar agents, are now sort of his housekeepers, and they live with him. They're two really cool characters, and they sort of take care of him, and they really love and respect him. You can really tell that they have a really close relationship. Now, the media comes in, and they want to interview Picard, and they are the interviewer is such a jerk. They said they weren't going to ask him about certain things, and they do. Picard gets all mad, and I don't know. I guess the reporter got what she wanted. But it was interesting to see the reporter come in and talk about what happened. Of course, this just tells us what happened, where Mars apparently gets completely destroyed and is still on fire to this day, or the day that they're filming, where a bunch of synths took out Mars. Crazy, crazy stuff. Also, in the first episode of Picard, we are introduced to Dahj. Dahj is one of the new characters, one of the new main characters in the story. And she apparently is activated. A bunch of Romulan, I guess, agents, we don't know where they're from yet, they come in, they kill her boyfriend. They stab him, and he's lying in a pool of blood. But she activates, gets all these powers, and just takes him out. That is a pretty nuts scene. Like I was talking about the show being kind of violent earlier. That is the uber violent part of one of the violent parts of Picard. So you see them all dead, and she escapes, and she goes to Picard for help. Now, Picard doesn't know who this is. She doesn't really know who he is, but for some reason she has like a vision of him and is able to find him, gaining all these special powers that she didn't know she had. So we're wondering, who is this girl? Why does she have all these powers? Later on, Picard's doing some investigating in the archives, and in the archives you see some of the stuff like Captain Picard Day, the banner from that show way back when, and you see like the Stargazer, and you see a bunch of like the Batleth and all these things from the Next Generation, which is really neat to see. But he pulls out a painting that Data had made that he had named Daughter, and it's her face. I got chills at that moment. I was like, whoa, it's Data's daughter? How is this? How can it be? He died like so long ago. he didn't have time to create someone like this, and it would have been known. Data died so long ago in Nemesis. Why is a daughter of his here? It's actually a big mystery. It got me wondering, how did this happen? I wonder how they're going to explain this. Somehow she's able to find Picard again, advice from her mom. And I put mom in quotes because this mom doesn't seem to be a real mom. It seems to be like some computer program that knows how to help Dahj when she's in trouble. And so the mom tells Dahj to go find Picard. She's able to do so because she's been, like I said, activated. She has all these powers now. And she goes to Picard, and Picard says, "You are special. You are my friend Data's daughter, somehow." And so we're like, oh my gosh, Dahj is going to be a huge part of this show, and it's going to be amazing to find out about her. Well, long story short, she dies. She dies shortly after that. In fact, very gorily. Like this Romulan spits this acid into her face, and she just disintegrates, and this phaser explodes, and who knows what happened. Dahj is gone. Well, there goes one of the characters. But we find out later that there's another one. Yeah, they're twins. And so this other twin just so happens to be on a Romulan-controlled Borg cube. That's pretty crazy. And the other sister, her name is Soji. And so she sort of talks to this creepy, skanky Romulan guy, and wonder what he's going to be all about. We kind of know he's going to be one of the main villains this season, so he's going to be trying to manipulate her. Picard's going to be trying to find Soji, and he goes and he finds out information from the Daystrom Institute, from Dr. Girardi, who I think is going to play a big role in this season as well. So that's kind of the recap of what happened in Picard Episode 1. I mentioned earlier that it is a slower paced show, but it is slowly introducing these characters to us. And I would say give it a chance, because I think it does pick up, but you have to be a little patient with this show. I certainly liked it. I found a lot to like it. I loved some of the, for example, musical cues that they threw in. I thought that was great. You actually got to hear some music from The Next Generation in certain parts of the episode. I think there's a great mystery here with Dahj, who died, and Soji, and who these people are. And why do the Romulans want to find out about them or want to get them? And why is there a Borg cube? I think that's going to be really interesting. Why is there a Borg cube in the show at all? So if you love the Borg, if you love Romulans, no Klingons in this series, that's in Discovery. I would check out Picard and give it a chance to watch it all the way through. I certainly am enjoying it, so let me know what you think of Star Trek Picard. I will see you guys next time.